In this video podcast, we're going to give you one piece of guidance that will help if you've been nervous or in your head or overthinking something and you just feel like you need to put things in perspective and to care a little bit less about whatever has just grown too large in your mind and looming. When we are really nervous or excited about something, we often feel like that field, that domain is at the center of the universe. It's all that matters. I'm going to give a bunch of examples so that this is really clear to you in your own life if you're doing this. It's the academic that does incredibly amazing research, but in this very niche area that nobody really knows about. So they feel like they're king of the hill, but it's a hill that most people don't even know exists. It's the person that thinks that M&A is the most prestigious job in the entire world in finance or law or whatever they're doing. In fact, part of what made me want to shoot this video is some books by Eric Katz. She did one book, it's called The Boys Club, which is a book about law and climbing the corporate ladder in the law world and mergers and acquisitions and how impressive that looked to everybody else in the firm or outside firms or other people that you meet. But for somebody in the art world, which is what her next book was about, that wouldn't be impressive at all. And they find certain people that own impressive galleries or, investors in art or the artists themselves to be way more impressive than somebody high up in the business world. So often we only compare ourselves within our unique, small corner of the world. It's the mom that thinks they have to make the perfect cupcakes and be early to everything and do everything just right and the perfect decorating in their house, so the home is just so. They might compare themselves to other moms in the mom group and they're all maybe trying to keep up in a certain way. So it's like we all are king or queens of the hill that we're on, but it's hills that other people don't even know or care about. And it's really important to remember that. It kind of reminds me of this one ex-boyfriend that I had who would kind of pretend, I know this is embarrassing, don't worry, it was high school, but he would pretend like he was racing other people in nearby cars. And even if he wasn't speeding per se, he would just maybe get into it and pass them and feel like he was winning some race. And I was just thinking, they don't know that they're in a race with you and maybe their competition is getting there safely. I don't know. It's kind of funny that we're in these unspoken competitions or feel superior in certain ways when other people are running completely different races from us. Other examples of this could be someone building a lot of their ego identity based off of working for a prestigious organization. And conversely, another person could build that same ego identity based on being the founder of a startup. Both of them might feel superior to the other one for opposite reasons. One person is like, well, I'm my own CEO. The other person is, I work for a huge Fortune 500 company. They both might use those to somewhat feel good about themselves. And I'm not trying to be critical here. I think I'm just trying to point out something that can help us when we're aware that we're doing it. It's the person that feels impressive because they can lift 600 pounds when, again, another person might feel like what matters is being able to run a marathon. I think we all fall prey to this occasionally, but the problem is that we're not always kings and queens of the hill. We also are at all sorts of places along it, and this leads to what's called upward and downward social comparison. So upward social comparison is where you look at people that you find more impressive than you and you think, oh my goodness, I'm doing so terrible. I need to do better. Look at them and where they are. Downward social comparison is the opposite. It's like, oh, well, at least I'm doing better than that person over there. And then, oh, I'm doing great, And I've noticed just ever since I learned about this theory in social psychology in college, I've noticed different people doing it. And I've noticed that, in fact, I think that this was part of what it even said in the textbook, but I've noticed it also in life, is that people that do upward social comparison, usually it doesn't make you feel very good about yourself, but it does make you feel motivated. So pro and con. The opposite is true of downward social comparison, where you feel better about yourself, but you do feel less motivated because it's like, wow, I am thriving. I don't need to worry. Now, this video is not about don't compare. I mean, that's a whole separate video. I also think comparison to a certain degree is normal. We are going to notice if a person is taller or shorter or all different things. So don't compare isn't always necessarily the healthiest advice, although I do think it's worthwhile to aim to have other ways of looking at the world and ourselves and what we want to do in it. But what I'm talking about in this video is a different concept, which is just to remember that there are tons and tons of other hills and mountains, and that can loosen the grip or hold of how we're doing on the mountain that we're trying to climb. It's the actor before a big audition, instead of thinking, oh my gosh, this is make or break it, this is the biggest thing ever. It's like, no, it's a play or it's a film and you'll be okay. And this isn't the biggest deal in the world. It's really not. Just go play, go have fun. And, it's the writer submitting to agents, thinking that this is make or break it. It's like, submit it, do your thing. But there are so many wonderful things going on in life, some of them career related, but of course there's so many other important things. And when we care a little bit less, it often goes a lot better, because when we care too much, we do stuff like we don't send the email to the agent because we care too much, because it would shatter us to not get the result we want. When we care a little bit less, we try again, because we view it with that perspective, that zoomed out lens of it's okay. It's not the biggest deal in the world. It's a thing that I want to do, but if it doesn't go well, I'll try something else, or I'll keep trying if this is really what I want to do, but I'll be okay. When we loosen our firm grip on what we think we need, it does broaden our perspective, both in terms of what matters in the world, how we're going about what we want, because we don't obsess over this is the one way or the one thing that I need. When we care too much about anything, things don't go our way. Think about the person that tries way too hard to get someone to like them, or someone that gets really nervous before a big game as an athlete and they choke. Anytime we care way too much, we're grasping, we're pulling, we put too much energy into it, it usually doesn't go well. There's this happy point. Generally, that healthy level of detachment while still caring about it is that magic middle point. Another way to gain perspective is not just in terms of different fields, domains, or interests, but also in terms of time. When we zoom out in time, we see how things just come and go and lose their significance over time, which I know can be really scary to think about. It reminds us of our own mortality, but in terms of not overstating the importance of minor events, it can just be helpful to remember. A wonderful book on time that I'm reading is by Matthew Haig. It's called How to Stop Time. And something small that was related to this topic that he mentioned was just walking down a certain street. The main character lives to be a lot older than a lot of people. That's all I'll say. That doesn't give away anything. You find that out right away. Anyway, hundreds of years later, he was seeing these street lamps in London, and he was remembering how modern they seemed, a few hundred years ago. And now they just seemed kind of quaint. It's the invention or news that's all the craze, and then later comes and goes. It's the trends. It's all of these things. It's the event that we thought was the biggest deal 10 years ago, and now we see isn't. So zooming out in terms of time can be helpful as well. And then I think anything about perspective would be remiss if it didn't mention something in terms of location. Just one quick interesting space fact is that I believe I heard in a talk one time that if you look in the galaxy, you're actually seeing stars, a lot of them from 7 years ago, some more or less, but 7 years ago, that's how far it is. That's when you're seeing that star. It might not even be there anymore. How wild is that? How small are we? And another benefit to doing this, I know this is also going to sound a bit harsh, but it makes us a little bit less insufferable. I think that everyone sort of does feel like their area of interest has this level of importance that other people don't necessarily feel that area has. And when we're able to hold this in mind, it does help us when we're conversing with other people. And of course, this just also makes us more informed. We can make this actionable by reading about different areas. For instance, that's one reason why reading, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, exposes us to so many other areas. For instance, if you read a biography about a field that you don't work in, or you read a novel about an area of the world that you don't live in, it just is so enlightening. It's like, what does this person find important? What matters to them? What is their day-to-day life like? And talk to people that care about other interests or other fields. That's why I also think it's really great to just be exposed to other kinds of people that are outside of our particular bubble that we spend most of our time in. Lastly, to help us see why we narrowly care about such a fixed number of things to begin with, let's explore the benefit to why we might do that. Why might we just care about our hill? Is that it's very difficult to excel in a ton of areas. So if you have determined, you know what, education really matters to me, that's what I'm going to care about and pour a lot into, great. Now you don't have to compete in all of the arenas. And again, you don't have to think about it as competition or comparison. You just don't have to aim to improve yourself in all of the areas. I used to think of life as like a bar graph, and there's different areas of life like health, service, career, relationship, spirituality, all these different things. And I told a therapist, this was in college, that I wanted to, as often as I could be, have those bars on the bar graph maxed out. I wanted to be doing as well as I could be in all these different areas. And I think at different times in my life, I had like 7 categories of life or 12. And I don't know, it's hard for me to conceptualize life as an interconnected thing. It's like I had to think about it in terms of categories. I've moved on from that quite a bit. But anyway, she encouraged me to think about it in terms of a pie chart. And so she was advocating that this pie chart way of conceptualizing these areas of life would be more beneficial than a bar graph, because this more closely demonstrates our finite nature, which is a much better visual because there's only so much that we can give in terms of time, energy, money, bandwidth, etc. So if you take all of those areas of life and you put it in a pie chart, then it's like, okay, well, if health takes a certain amount and family and friends take a certain amount and your career takes a certain amount, it's like certain things, there's going to be bigger or smaller parts of that pie chart. And if one thing, like let's say that you are training for an ultra marathon, that is going to take up quite a bit more time, and the friends and family bucket is going to have to naturally maybe shrink a little bit, or you don't stay late at work as much, so the career one shrinks a little bit. There is only so much you to give. So having certain domains that we care about is really, really helpful because it just helps us narrow our field of focus in a potentially helpful way. I've been talking about how to broaden that field of focus here, but it's also good to address the benefits of narrowing your field of focus, to having, this is what I like to research, this is what I like to learn about, because life is short. We only have so much to give. So why not do the things that really matter to you, of course? And if you are someone that sets really ambitious, big goals across many areas, especially if they're pretty vague and not extremely clear, it can slowly make you feel worse about yourself if you're not hitting certain benchmarks and feeling some sense of efficacy and achievement. So sometimes just saying, I am going to care about this thing and focus on this right now, and then you do that, and then you move on to the next thing, can be helpful. So in conclusion, I hope that this can help loosen our grip over how much we maybe care about our specific niche or focus, help reshape how we think about certain comparisons, and broaden our perspectives. And finally, maybe just seeing that those 2 to 3 things that you care about so much are likely totally different than the things that someone you probably will meet at a party really loves and cares about, which you probably already know that. But it's sometimes just helpful to keep that in mind, because what we spend most of our time thinking about is just really different than what our next door neighbor might spend a lot of their day thinking about. And that's part of the fun of life, is connecting and broadening that perspective. So thank you for being here as always. If you are enjoying the podcast, please leave a review on your favorite podcast app or website and tell a friend. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next week.